Hi, Britt. Glad to see you and meet you finally, and welcome you to our show.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
This is a great experience that I waited 50 years for. I bought your books originally about 45 years ago, a UFO Contact from the Pleiades, and I think we'll be showing that first slide of the book we're talking about shortly. And essentially, I realized that, and first now just discovered your illustrious career as an author um, at BritElders.com.
Yeah,
So these people would like to know about your other accomplishments. It's
thank you.
um, it's really a real a joy to see another author that really you've covered the world and experiencing lots of things besides this momentous occasion of meeting Billy Meyer and the
Yeah.
whole experience that he represents. You know, to be honest, and that's why I wanted to talk with you. To be honest, the experience years ago of reading the original two books separately,
Mhm.
it was an anticipated process of waiting for that second volume to come out and buying it as soon as we could before it went out of print. Um, Overall, I knew Marcel Vogel personally.
Oh,
I also edited a book for David Froning, and I was
uh,
pleased to see how much he contributed to your, and vice versa. He was inspired by Billy's UFO stories as well. Um,
yes.
but but in general, the experience of those photos, I thought, as many other people probably thought too, would revolutionize and force the disclosure of ET contact 50 years ago. And of course, that leads me to my first question. Why do you think the public at large around the world is still, even today, I think it was a few months ago or a year ago, we're selling maybe two of your original photos, Billy Meyer's original photos, at Sotheby's auction house, as if they're, you know, antique renditions of something that we would wish for, and certainly these are the originals, and you know you can put them on your wall and you worship them or something. It still is it's such an unusual case, and I think over the top in terms of precision and accuracy and personal contact, that maybe you could explain what was the psychological reaction in the public that maybe the Palladians didn't expect.
Well, the Meyer case is so unique because it is a contact case. That's the first thing. And the contacts took place over a long period of time. So it wasn't like it was a happenstance meeting or an abduction, a one-time thing. It took place over years.
Hmm.
And that made it extremely unusual. Nobody knew what to do with it. It was literally a division. It wasn't just the UFO community, it was the public too. They went, wow, the photos are too good to be true, or oh my gosh, this is amazing. So there was an absolute polarity in people's
Polarization,
opinions,
yeah, polarizing.
which was really interesting. One of the reasons we wanted to bring the book out now, Billy is 87 years old.
Oh my,
Wendell Stevens, one of the investigators, has passed.
yeah.
My husband Lee has passed. And it's just Tom and I. And we wanted Billy to be able to enjoy having the books, both of them together, come out at the same time, and see the type of reaction and how it's changed over 45 years. And
Mm.
it certainly has changed. It's interesting because when you look back to the 70s, when we didn't have personal computers, when we didn't have cell phones that took great photographs and movie footage and things like that, and you didn't have programs like Photoshop, um, how did he do it? So looking back now and knowing all of that makes it a complete, unique, and new experience for people today. They're much more open, much more receptive. I know the Navy coming out with their pilots' photographs or images of video, and many other people coming forward to discuss what's happened in their lives, whether it's been a contact, an abduction, or even just a sighting. It's made people more aware of the subject, less judgmental, and more involved in the, I don't know, sort of inner workings of their own thought process of what would I do if I had an experience like this, and how would I react to it? I'm getting a lot of email from people that are sharing their experiences, which is truly wonderful that as kids, as grown-ups, they just feel they've got to tell somebody because now they don't feel so alone. They know many other people out there having the same types of experiences. So the psychology of 45 years ago versus today is literally night and day. It's very, very different. People are much more open, much more receptive. The youth today, very much into this subject, which is quite interesting to me. I mean, you knowing Dave Froning, Dave was such a love. I just adored him. And Marcel, they couldn't openly get out there and say, wow, I really want to get into this. But they studied not just the Meyer case, but many cases, so they could learn from it. The youth today seems to want to learn from all of these cases that are out there and the experiences that people are having.
Well, that's certainly a reassuring development, and
Yeah.
it also explains why 45 years is the number you chose, and not around about 50. But in general, I would agree with everything you said. And it bothers me that in the book by Wendell Stevens, as well as your book, I think the problem that Billy had years ago with the number of assassination attempts was so disturbing, and so amazing that he survived all of them. That I often wonder, well, who would go to such an extreme to try to remove him? But we're experiencing that even with our presidential candidate. So there's hateful people everywhere. But that also raises the question in the broader sense, and I'm trying to focus just on the Pleiadians to understand them some more, because this is 400 light years away. I'm working on a UFO ufology and UFO sociology book, the textbook, that basically would examine a lot of these cases, including yours. But in general, it raises my interest in the attempts that various groups, ET groups, have made to try to influence our society. And in my view, like the 1952 buzzing of Washington, D.C., in general, it was sort of a failure. You know, I don't know if you have an opinion about that attempt to make them aware of the fact that they exist, and instead the Air Force wanted to just shoot them down.
Well, you know, that was the purpose behind the contacts that Billy had. It was to say, all right, here's the evidence. We're giving you the ability to take photographs, movie footage, have metal samples that can be analyzed, hear the audio that the craft created, have that analyzed, have witnesses available. All of that was there because their primary goal was to get us to a point to realize we are not the only thinking beings in the universe. That's a big deal. A lot of us are still not there, but most of us, I think, are moving in that direction. But it's so important when you look at the primary goal of them saying you're not the only ones out there. And now we're talking about, at this point in history, of setting up bases on Mars and using those bases as jump-off points to go further into space. I can understand why they would want to tell us that. I think something happened to us because after we got to the moon and we were doing all of that, everything just sort of stopped and it got quiet again. And, you know, we weren't ready. We really weren't ready. Part of the things that they say we have to do in order to be ready to take our place in space with these other civilizations is that we need to be more attached to our own spiritual consciousness, almost like a spiritual technology. We have to realize that we are not existing just in a physical world. We're existing on many planes at the same time. In the spiritual plane, the attachment to creation, as they call it, is so valuable and so important to the growth of the human. And that, I think, is beginning to resurface. For a while, I think it too was lost. But now more and more people are getting into not necessarily religion, but their attachment to spirituality, whether it's through nature, whether it's through a religion, whether it's through just understanding that there is a greater source than ourselves and that we need to better ourselves as individuals, then we can be better in the totality of the planet.
And even environmentally, sure.
Yes, definitely.
So in a way, they're trying to expand our environmental consciousness to include other planets and races. But in general, one of the messages that we get from your book and Wendell Stevens is that they really were one of the major originators of our race. And they're so similar in appearance to us that it certainly is convincing. But that also raises my question about why have we not been able to see any other photos except for the one that I believe it's Aket, or I forgot how to pronounce it.
Asket, yes.
Is the only blonde image that we see in the entire book, and maybe the only one that's been released publicly. But, you know, Billy's been fortunate to obviously meet many, and it's sort of, you know, there's so many questions that I have. I'm trying to narrow them down. You know, here he gets a ride to Saturn. I just reviewed the stories of all the trips that he was allowed to have. Norman Paulson talks about that in his experience with the contactees that Van Tassel facilitated. But there again, you know, Van Tassel's attempt to notify the Air Force office in Washington, D.C. and get a return receipt requested before the UFO showed up in July of 1952 didn't do any good at all, you know?
No.
So these advance notices don't seem to really sink in. And that's what I'm sort of seeing with this case in some ways too. You know, what happened to the metal samples? What happened to the other? There's even hair samples I read about, and obviously lots of personal details about Semjase, who's the major contact that Billy. I also would love to ask, did you ever meet Semjase?
No, I didn't. I would have
Oh my God,
loved
I can't believe it. I really can't believe it.
Yeah.
She even mentions your name in one of the conversations. Oh,
I have seen craft in many places around the world that are unknowns. I never saw a physical craft in Switzerland. None of us did.
Wow.
Nor did we meet Semjase. The reason for that, though, is very interesting because Billy told us that the Pleiadians work among people of Earth, that they actually may be out on the street. So they did not want their pictures taken. They did not want to be promoted in any way, so that they could maintain their anonymity.
But still, to the extreme that even you were deprived of meeting her, doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it certainly would add to the authenticity of this whole case if you had the experience like that.
I would have loved to have sat down with her. I would have had questions that went on for days and days and days. Yeah, because you have to remember Billy. Even though he was very worldly, he was not educated as we think of an education.
Exactly.
And his questions tended to focus on what was happening around him directly. And that was early on in the investigation that we found that out. So we kept feeding him questions, you know, as the same time we're trying to take all of the physical information and data and samples and evidence and have it analyzed and checked. And we're still asking him, talk to them about this, talk to them about that. What are they most concerned about? And all the way along, they were most concerned about the human race.
Oh,
That
sure.
we have not learned the true meaning of love.
Right.
We cloak it in everything else, but we don't know what the true meaning is because we haven't really touched our heart yet. We're like adolescents, just growing, and we haven't gotten to the point where we truly understand that. When that happens, a shift occurs, and to them, it's almost a raising of the vibrations of the people of Earth when we finally do understand what love and creation are all about. But until then, we're still growing, we're still learning.
Sure. And actually, the I guess the threat of self-destruction or going extinct is something that I keep reading about in various situations.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Even, for example, what was the latest one I read about the situation on Mars, where my friend and colleague uh, Brandenburg, John Brandenburg, actually
Mhm.
wrote two books on Mars, and the discovery he made approximately 50 million years ago by radioactive dating, that
Mm.
there's a xenon 29 signature of a nuclear explosion.
Wow.
And this was, you know, something that is incontrovertible. He's a nuclear physicist. He knows how
Right.
unusual this was. And then he got permission by the DOD to release it publicly in a journal article. And then
Uh-huh.
finally he published a book about it. But the issue that I was reading about from the Van Tassel contacts, I wrote A Flying Saucer is the name of Van Tassel's first book. And
Right.
in that book, he has the telepathic communications recorded. And one of those statements there is, well, we saw the previous race destroy the planet in your solar system, and we're trying to prevent it from happening again. And I'm
Right.
thinking to myself, putting two and two together, well, what is the asteroid belt doing there? You know, there's no reason for a whole bunch of pieces of a planet except this amazing story declaration that, and combined with Brandenburg's discovery, my God, it's something we're about to revisit once again. And then, isn't it true that the Pleiadians also admit that there was some nuclear exchange and they had to go to another planet as well?
Yes. What happened is the Pleiadians are not from the Pleiades.
That,
They are originally from Lyra. And Lyra was a big star system. They had a population kind of like ours, very divided and always fighting with each other. They ended up destroying Lyra. The difference was the beings that lived there had the technology and the knowledge to escape. So they left in ships and went searching for a planet that they could engineer. It
yeah,
literally took engineering a planet so they could exist there. And they found their home in the Pleiades. Originally at the planet they called Era, and that's where they existed. But it's something they don't want us to go through. They hope we can outgrow this fighting phase we're in. They do make a very interesting comment, Ptah did, that they cannot interfere with our growth or development. And then when the question was posed, what if there is a war that would destroy the planet? Not
hmm,
just the humans, but the planet.
right.
And they said, we cannot interfere yet, yet being the operative word. So if
Well,
we were going to destroy ourselves, I think they and many, many other civilizations would be very concerned because it creates a ripple effect throughout the universe.
well,
It
sure.
does,
It's a failure of the experiment.
yeah,
They've invested
exactly,
thousands or millions of years in, it's at least thousands, right? Hundreds of
right?
thousands.
Yeah, but why would you want to have all of that energy, though, explode throughout the universe? That would be the worst thing that could happen. It would just, and energy has kind of its own consciousness, I believe. I think it's really important that we look at what thoughts do, how productive they are, how strong and forceful they are. And we learn how to put our thoughts into a proper compartment so we know what we're really thinking rather than just talking off the top of our head and showing anger and feeling anger.
Mm-hmm. My wife and I meditate every day, and I wrote a book on modern meditation, and I give a seminar on that once a year at our local Pathways expo as well. But I see in general that we still have at least the interference with the nuclear reactors, the nuclear powered missile sites. I'm still looking for a map that I saw in video or one of the shows, UFO shows, where it was Life magazine around 1952 or so, and they showed a map of the United States where every single nuclear missile site had been visited by UFO. Which ones were, and it turned out to be 99% of them. So
Yeah.
to me, this is remarkably wonderful in terms of alerting the military in our country that there's some watchdogs out there that can interfere with the operations of the most destructive thing we've invented. And it's happening over in England. I actually talked to one of the military guys who worked in the UK, and the same thing occurred there. A UFO overhead, everything went dark. And it's never supposed to happen, can't possibly happen, but the ETs know how to do it. So I have great hope. And actually, I should mention, maybe you can comment on it. Apparently, the Pleiadians' primary task, I'm actually quoting from Wendell Stevens' book, their primary task is to protect the Earth. So, and they mentioned other races and other ET groups that apparently they're referring to in the protection scheme, but you and I are also discussing, can they protect us from ourselves?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the big thing. I think we have to do that. We have to step up and take the responsibility for ourselves, which we haven't been doing a very good job of, in my opinion. Not just care for the planet, and caring for the planet isn't just going green and things like that. It's understanding that the planet has cycles, it moves, it's a being, it's an energy unto itself. And we have to respect that. We have to do a lot of respecting right now, and we're not. Respect of each other, respect to the planet, respect to the universe, respect for creation, primarily respect for self. If we can hit the marks on all of those, we'll be okay. But yeah, they don't want this planet destroyed, not because they want something from the planet, because it is, first of all, we're like their little brothers and sisters. They did help populate this planet. They feel like it's home in a strange way, but they feel like we are a group of beings that can eventually really develop into wonderful beings that are capable of going into space and working with other civilizations and learning from them.
Join the Federation, right?
Exactly. Which is important. And we have to get there by having that respect for all of those things and working on it and learning to trust what's happening inside our hearts rather than relying so much as what's happening in our heads.
And the power negotiations that we do perhaps need to be changed as well between different countries, to exhibit our powerful abilities to defend ourselves and to attack. And it's amazing how militaristic all of our exchanges have been for this past century, literally.
Unfortunate, isn't it?
It's very discouraging in a way. And also I wonder, with all the nuclear proliferation that's still going on, sooner or later, obviously, some of these notorious countries probably need some visitations too,
Yeah.
besides our country,
Yes.
because their nuclear missiles need to be controlled as well.
Well, I think that has happened and is happening. Um, Dr. Sala has done a lot of research into this area. He
hmm,
has a lot of information on it. I knew Marina Popovich, the Russian astronaut,
hmm.
and we had talked about this, that they had UFO sightings over their military bases, over their
Ah,
nuclear bases. So it's going on.
I see.
There isn't the communication around the globe that we need
Yeah.
right now. I think it's developing in that area, but it's not there yet.
Well, now you're leading into a very important question of mine that I've held for years, and that is whenever we have a major global problem,
Mm.
oftentimes there's a new committee, a new focus group. The United Nations was created, obviously, out of World War One, if my history is correct. That's my
Mhm.
weakest point. But the League of Nations is really that kind of recourse to a crisis situation. And why aren't we considering that internationally now that disclosure seems to be a lot more prominent and prevalent and maybe imminent? Because
Wow.
that kind of committee, international committee on ET relationships, as I call it, astrosociology, maybe, is overdue.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. Maybe you should start one. It's needed.
Actually, I actually was part of, it was at the National Press Club in
Hmm.
2010. There was a citizens committee, the citizens hearing on disclosure. And
Hmm.
we had, I think it was at least 4 or 6 retired senators and representatives on the panel.
Oh,
I was one of the people that testified, and my 10-minute, exactly 10-minute discourse, which was autobiographical, it's on our website if you're interested. Um,
uh-huh.
but that's as far as we got, except for recently, where we've had these hearings that almost get to the point where it's hard to believe the information that we're getting, even from these insiders that are, I think, disclosing more than we need to hear about craft that travel all over the place and the military has access to them. Uh,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure,
Very true.
what
No, but we
your,
do need and I've been saying this for a long time, we need a unified hub where all of the information can come in and go out.
hmm,
And we're getting there, I think. But it's something that would be invaluable because it's not just governments. We don't want to be in a position when the government says it's real, then we'll believe it. This is something we need to figure out for ourselves inside ourselves. But if you have access to information from all around the world through many different sources from people that have had great experiences and those that haven't had great experiences, people are then better prepared to understand what's really going on out there. And it does take that input coming from everywhere.
hmm,
Um, the things going on in South America, the things going on in Latin America, we're not aware of. We're not aware of what's happening in Europe or in the Middle East.
hmm,
But unless you're right in the middle of the community, and then there's that group that talks to each other. But other than that, there's just so much information that's being lost and not being able to be processed by the public, and they need the information.
yeah, absolutely. I'm actually, I was on the Ancient Aliens program, and I know several of the producers, Linda Moulton Howe, for example, David Childress, and um, and I feel that's one of the nice avenues of disclosing the relationship between the ancient stuff and the most current. Um, and it's great. Your book actually explains if I pronounce it correctly, the disc of Phaistos.
And
Um,
Discophistos, yes.
Phaistos, and the little saucer image that's right there. You have the window has an arrow pointing to the saucer
Yeah,
image.
you just follow it around. I mean, you
Yeah.
see the man's reaction after he sees this UFO shaped disc. and his hair goes straight up. Yeah,
Well,
it's
I'm glad you decoded it, because even the Ancient Alien show, when they show the disc, they say it's had never been decoded. Nobody can figure it out. It's in a
no, we did
language
it
we don't
years ago.
understand. Exactly.
We
So,
were working with some archaeologists. They said, "Oh yeah, we know what this means. Look at this thing."
oh, that's wonderful. Boy. Well, it also is surprising that you have I know it's in your book, but even more extensive description of the Great Pyramid and its
Yeah.
origins and purpose and how it was created in Wendell's book as well. I
Hmm.
don't know if you want to summarize the importance of that structure, but I was
Well,
fascinated to read about it.
the pyramid itself is quite amazing, but you have so many places around the world, not just the pyramid, but and not just Dendra, which a lot of people get the connection between Dendra and the Pleiades, but you've got if the Temple Teotihuacan in Mexico.
Hmm.
They have a plaza of the Pleiades there. And when you walk out on it, into the floor is carved 7 stars.
Hmm.
Now, it's interesting because we can't see all 7 with the naked eye. At some point in time when the air was a little cleaner, we could, but we can't now. But they have these stars carved into the floor. You have so many different things that relate directly to the Pleiades.
Hmm.
But then when you look a little bit further, you find out that you also have it with Orion's belt. You have it with Sirius. You have it with Arcturus. Um, the main stars that appear everywhere are reported to have brought civilization to this planet.
Hmm.
All of these different cultures from out there have brought their beings here, have literally bred with the humans of this planet. And so we all carry this interstellar DNA. Billy said at one point that that was one of the important things that the places like Teotihuacan or Cheops had at a point in history to remind us that we are all star beings and
Hmm.
that we need to wake up to that reality in ourselves. When we had a long conversation with Billy, especially about the pyramid, and he says it's not just the direction it's pointing to, the specific measurements and things like that, but it's about reminding everybody that we are part of a star culture ourselves.
Hmm.
I love this paragraph.
Well, it also the amazing craft that the Palladians use to fly around, and the variations of those craft are remarkably technologically attractive. And
Yes.
that's what I was trying to get to, is that I'm familiar with some of the analysis of the Great Pyramid and how
Mhm.
it seems to be a power generator in some ways, without going into too much detail. But of course, the craft that are not only providing acceleration, as Semyasi explains, but
Yeah.
also the ability to warp space and to get the light year travel very quickly
Yeah.
is incredible. And certainly we're theoretically predicting this is possible. So in
Yes.
this day and age, at least it's comprehensible that you would have these 2 types of acceleration and light speed travel ability. But
Yes.
I'm curious whether any of that technology is being shared at all to accelerate our abilities to travel.
I think it probably was. I know Dave Froning, whom you knew. He had, I thought, the greatest concept of it, and he had this little map all drawn out and everything, that it takes so long to get from point A to point B because time and space don't exist. And I think many in the physics world are beginning to understand that time and space don't exist. They're our creation. So if you have so much time that it takes you to leave a physical area, and then no time, no space, and then so much time to enter a physical area, I do think there are many scientists out there working on it. John McVeigh, who was a wonderful, dear man in Scotland, he
Mm,
worked on a program called tachyons,
mm,
and he called it tachyon energy, that null space and time place. So there are many scientists out there working on it. Now, whether or not we can reach that and reach it quickly, I think that goes a lot to where we are as individuals,
right.
and as a collective society,
Mm,
because they don't want us in space unless we're ready to be there.
I see. So perhaps the stories about our military capability is sort of like off the grid and maybe not necessarily even acknowledged,
Right.
which it sort of makes me wonder how the military has gained so much control over the ET communications and relationships that the civilian population's been deprived of at great expense.
Yeah. Well, my dad worked on the early missile program. He actually worked with von Braun in the
Wow.
very early programs. And he would come back and he would be sitting there with his engineer buddies, and they'd be talking about the things they saw flying while they were sending up missiles. And they would, get these early missiles to go straight up, and they were lucky if they came straight down. Sometimes they just did a 90-degree and shot out over the desert. But he was at White Sands, he was at Los Alamos, he was at the Cape, and they always saw these things, but
Yeah.
they were all on NDEs, non-disclosures. You
Yeah.
could not talk about it at all, or you would lose everything. And back then, when the government said you would lose everything, they meant it. So
Yeah.
it was a different situation. I think that's what sort of propelled all of this. We have to keep it quiet. Plus, there was a situation where the people weren't ready for it. We really
Mm,
weren't. Looking back into the 50s and 60s, you can see that we weren't ready for a mass discussion of UFOs, much less a mass sighting. Unfortunately, today, if we were to have a mass sighting, a lot of us would say, oh my gosh, it's AI. And we wouldn't take it any further. We
yeah.
wouldn't allow our curiosity to move it forward for us in the thought process and examination process and the investigation process.
Mm,
So yeah, it's it's a very strange thing. It's scary that the military has managed, and not just our military, militaries around the world have managed to keep a lid on this as tightly as they have. But it's not happening so strongly anymore. People are beginning to speak out, speak up, not for the fact that they want to be recognized, but that they want the information out there.
well, that
Finally.
obviously leads us into the question of how do we get the information out there? Because
Yeah.
obviously you're a major agent in doing that, and now you've started all over again.
Yeah.
So what is your plan of execution of this great mission of yours?
Wow.
Because you're in
That's a
charge of your
really
whole
good question.
army of public affairs officials.
I'll tell you, I never expected and never anticipated in any way, shape, or form that I would end up devoting my life to UFOs. But once you're into the subject, you don't get out of it.
Yeah,
Because if you're the least little bit curious, you want more and more and more.
sure.
So I have continued, not just on the Meyer case. Oh my gosh, we were involved with Mexico and the sightings that began down there in 91 and continue today. We've been involved with cases in South America, in Europe. We've
Mm,
worked with researchers all over the world. I talk a lot on podcasts and other things. That
yeah.
helps. But it's ideas like your class, like
Mm.
your textbook, that will spark people to want to
Oh,
know
thank
more.
you. Well, that's
And then they
encouraging.
will pay attention to people that are doing these podcasts, because the podcasters are wonderful. They afford the public a wealth of knowledge from a
Mm,
variety of sources. And the people that agree to go on them are fabulous. They've had experiences, or they have a base of knowledge that needs to be shared. But I think taking it to an educational level, brings it to a whole new realm. And I think it's about time.
Well, thank
And
you.
I've seen the change. I've got to speak real quick for a personal second.
Sure.
Because some of the schools up here, I live in northern Arizona, and they had asked me to come in and talk to their classes.
Mm-hmm.
So they took a test. It was kind of an experiment. They took a test prior to me coming in. I talked to the classes about UFOs, talked to the classes specifically about the Meyer case. They all got interested in what was going on in the world. They got interested in math, in science. Their little minds and imaginations, this is third through fifth graders, went wild. They took the test, the exact same test, a week later, and they all passed it. It was because something sparked in them, turned them on to the fact they wanted more information. And they could see how it all merged together.
And this was a technological test of some sort?
It was math, basic science. I mean, we're talking third to fifth
Wow.
graders, but
Oh
it
my
was enough
goodness.
to really get them going.
Oh, so there's hope for the combination of technology and science and
Yeah.
they call it. That's wonderful. Oh, I'm encouraged that maybe university students can also be inspired once it
Hmm.
becomes an acceptable topic for study. And I know there's some professors out there that already are interested and involved. So yeah, it's
It's
probably
wonderful, Tom.
overdue.
It's great.
Well, a textbook is a lot more difficult than a narrative
Yes.
book. I like doing narrative books or edited books. Those are the easiest, you know. But I'm happy to make time to do this because it is so important, and you're obviously in agreement that now is the time to consider, you know, what is our next steps and what do we recommend? Because I think having a short list of recommendations to, for example, I'm passionate about climate change.
Hmm.
I've discovered Jim Hanson's map of our 400,000 year cycles,
Hmm.
and basically it's 100,000 years for an ice age. And the funny thing is, temperature, sea level, and CO2 all track each other through
Right.
those four cycles. And once you realize that, and he delineates it so well, I said, oh my goodness, now we can see what's going to happen because we're at 420 parts per million of CO2 that the Earth
Right.
has never seen for 500,000 years or more. So unfortunately, the other climatologists are not telling the public that. And
Yeah.
then I find out the International Panel on Climate Change is not dominated, but populated by fossil fuel industries,
Oh, oh,
which is
great.
a really scary thing when I learned that, because even the public release of the summary for the IPCC reports are
Hmm.
the ones that they contribute to the most.
Yeah.
So everything's watered down to the point of, oh, we're trying to keep it under 1.5 degrees C. Well, that's crazy. It's silly because we're headed for 6 degrees C just because of the 420,
Yeah.
and we're increasing that. So it's difficult to consider how do you communicate that to the public. I'm
Right.
trying next step, and you might too, to get a professionally made YouTube video that's short, five
Very
or 10
good.
5 minutes, 10 minutes. I mean, those kind of messages that are animated and very entertaining perhaps can then sink into the unconscious enough to be passionately, emotionally reminding of the bear in the woods type image that Jungian psychology tells you is very important to plant into the audience. So, you know, this is
Right.
serious. This is scary enough that you got to be prepared and do something.
That's a great idea, though, to put together and maybe not just one, but maybe a series of
Right,
really profound little YouTube clips because the
yeah,
attention span is not what it should be.
right.
So if you
And
can get
so
their attention and bring them in, that's wonderful.
and you're doing interviews right now, but I think the other type of media that the young people will watch 5 or 10 minutes and make sure it's plenty of images and animations and you know various. You'll see the videos that are out there that are so cool you just can't stop watching them because
Yeah.
the guy that's talking is also diverting your attention to this so many things that are memorable. Um,
Hmm.
and I seem to remember the message more clearly when that type of video is made.
Yes.
So that's just my little sharing.
I love
I'm
that.
aiming
That's a
for
great idea.
aiming for next. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
because you just can't hit everyone out there, and little things like that hit more people.
mhm.
I think that's really a brilliant idea.
Oh, thank you. Um, Also, I kind of wonder when Billy passes away, I understand that they were sort of working to study him for many incarnations, as they say. Do you feel that there is somebody else that'll be the main contact person?
I do. I think the Pleiadians are too connected to our planet to not have a physical contact. I know that they told Billy this too, that they had tried to make contact with others just prior to making contact with him, but
Mm,
those people weren't willing to, suffer the slings and arrows that he was.
mhm.
And so they didn't push it. They don't want to force it. They want people that they recognize the incarnation patterns of, which is why they selected Billy, but they monitored him for 10 years
Yeah,
before they actually had a face-to-face contact with him in 75. So I think there are others. I think there are people that have had similar incarnation patterns as Billy and go back to the Pleiades and that
mhm.
connection there. And I think the Pleiadians will definitely keep a connection on this planet,
I see.
or maybe many. We might
Oh, that'd be
need
great.
many.
Of
Yeah,
course, that's what I'm hoping for,
yeah,
singular people that all of a sudden there's so many of them that they start, making an effect, an impact. Yeah.
right.
Well, one beautiful release that you just let me know about is this documentary about the Billy Meyer UFO contact from the Pleiades that Vimeo now has available. So
Yes,
I'm happy to promote that here on this video as well, because to find out that $5 or $10 can buy an hour and a half documentary of everything that you've experienced and Billy has been experiencing is absolutely remarkable. I think the video format is even more engaging than sometimes a book can be,
yes,
especially for a lot of people. So, yeah, the documentary is certainly affordable, and I found it just by going to Vimeo on Google with the UFO Contact from Pleiades. And that was easy to find. So I hope people take advantage of that.
it's an interesting documentary. It's old, but
Mhm.
it's very good and very informative.
Yeah, very in depth, and it's great to see Wendell engaged and
Yeah.
and your Lee Elders as well. So, and you of course too. But well, is there anything else that you'd like to summarize or overall that we didn't touch on you wanted to say?
Oh my gosh. Just keep working on ourselves, on opening our hearts, on connecting to each other, to nature, to creation. Start bettering ourselves and being respectful and maybe even a little more honest with ourselves and
And
what
more
we're really
loving
feeling.
and
Yeah,
more loving, right?
yeah.
Great.
Learn love. Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Bert, and I wish you all the success in the future and spreading the good word, and hopefully you'll be on some of these government panels eventually, and I'll see you on the great shows of MUFON or UFO Contact in the Desert or all those other ones that.
Yeah, I'm doing a speaking engagement in November in Phoenix and the LA Expo in January. And
Excellent.
so we're just going to keep putting it out there, letting people make their own decisions.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you very much. All the
Thank you,
best.
Tom. I've really enjoyed this. This is great.
Thank you. I'll send you a copy of the textbook when it's ready.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you. Signed, please.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Bye.